A blinding and extremely bright light chased after the young girl, her mouth open in a silent scream. She could only watch as the light slowly destroyed her, unable to see through it. Her heartbeat was faint, barely noticeable, and the heart monitor beeped softly. Hospital walls, for drips, the girl lay unconscious on the bed, her fragile life sustained by an oxygen mask. A dark-skinned guy bent down close to her, gently caressing her pale, cold face and stroking her thick hair. His little sister always loved to defy him, but now she didn't even react when he teased her. The loss overwhelmed him, and he whispered bitter words in his heart. Only now, when he was sure his sister couldn't hear him, did he dare to admit that she wasn't the only one in the family to awaken a power. He, too, had awakened, and he was here for a reason, or rather, not just to visit his unconscious sister. His power was to steal, he could snatch others' abilities, and now a faintly glowing green gem hovered above her head. Complete power theft, brain explosion, launching a mental blast to attack enemies, though a bit weak, but it was her power and had special meaning. The gem floated above the guy's palm, and he marveled at this acquisition because if it were stronger, Teresa wouldn't have been turned into an ice statue instantly by a stray attack. He wondered if it was really accidental because the distance to Teresa was quite far. Shouts echoed from the hallway, a male and female voice arguing, calling someone a murderer, then being countered, saying that person had saved many more lives. Calls for calm because it was impossible to control everything at once. Coincidentally, Miss Sinclair was at the store. Those were his parents, the protagonists, lawyers of the man who almost killed their daughter, now defending him, saying they didn't want this to happen, because heroes aren't gods and they did their best, sometimes accidentally harming others while fighting monsters. The woman covered her sad face with her hands, her husband threw the lawyer's papers on the ground, shouting he wouldn't sign, telling them to take their filthy money and leave. A bead of sweat rolled down the lawyer's temple, vividly imagining the consequences awaiting his client. In the next moment, the hospital room door slammed shut and the man's hand reached for the tablet with the documents. His father tried to persuade his son, appealing to reason, really wanting to trade Teresa's life for money, but the guy placed a hand on the man's shoulder, squeezed lightly, and replied that his sister was in a vegetative state and his family needed the money to provide everything necessary for her. Despite conflicting emotions battling in his father's heart, he didn't reply, the words immediately stuck in his throat. While his parents hugged and tried to comfort each other, their son demanded additional conditions from the lawyer. The man, with high spirits, leaned forward with interest. He wanted the hero who hurt his sister to apologize directly, face to face, and furthermore, the Berkshire Company should officially apologize too. The lawyer's plump body trembled with frustration, asking if he could apologize on behalf, but the guy replied firmly, the hero must come directly. The lawyer began to apologize profusely. The A-rank hero schedule was too busy. David Evans Jr. wanted to apologize directly but was too busy fighting and couldn't come. Moreover, they were willing to pay an extra $100,000 as compensation. The protagonist smiled upon hearing the offer, quickly scribbling with a pen on the papers without looking at the lawyer, handing him the contract, who received the documents with delight. The many windows of the hospital lit up the deserted street below. The lawyer was overjoyed, calling his client to inform him that everything was settled, just an extra $100,000 to wrap it up. On the other end, a young man laughed, drinking a beverage, praising the man and promising his secretary would send the money over. The lawyer hung up and chuckled, yes, heroes like to relax, if only they could also awaken their powers. The dark-skinned guy returned to his sister's bedside and, as if she could hear, asked her not to blame him for signing the contract, especially under such conditions, but she needn't worry, he would uncover the truth, because he didn't believe it was all accidental. The guy promised he would change this world, because some people who awaken don't deserve to be called heroes. His name was Adam Sinclair, working as an intern reporter, and his sister, Teresa, according to witnesses and the rescuer himself, was accidentally injured by an A-rank hero. To carry out his plan, Adam moved away from his parents to another area. In Albuquerque, he could execute his plan without disturbing his grieving parents. Adam rented a room in a small dormitory, and now, stepping into the common living room, he met two girls. Sitting on the couch, she introduced herself and her cute blonde friend. The other neighbor hadn't come home yet. The girls' names were Mar Perry and Karen Wold. The latter, a bit older, asked his name. The guy introduced himself wearily. Mar smiled sweetly and suggested celebrating the arrival of their new roommate, as this didn't happen often. Karen said she would be in the library because she just started university, so they could have fun without her. Adam returned with his suitcase and stepped into his room, immediately replying that it wasn't necessary. He was new here, tired, and wanted to rest. The girls looked at him in surprise. He didn't unpack his suitcase, didn't take off his coat, lay flat on the bed with his arms spread out. Then, he took out his mobile phone and went to a video sharing website, opening a video of heroes fighting monsters, already watched by many. He realized there were many videos explaining the powers, when on the phone screen appeared a black portal, with brilliant lights around. Someone had filmed it in the sky. Adam didn't remember when this happened, but suddenly dark portals appeared all over the world, through which monsters came to the planet, like giant wolves with fangs and bright eyes, as if they had been magnified many times by the power of a network. The planet could only fend off this invasion of monsters thanks to those with powers. The lucky ones were called heroes and were celebrated every time they won, like stars on the red carpet, where in the case of heroes were the destroyed streets. To prevent hunters from abusing their powers, the power law was enacted, stipulating that only hunters who passed the test and were certified as heroes could use their powers. Looking closer, the young man with tanned skin realized he was watching the video of the hero injuring Teresa. Adam sighed heavily and locked his phone screen. There was nothing suspicious to be found now. Better to watch it again tomorrow. Glancing at the time, he saw it was already 3:30 in the morning. He still needed to brush his teeth and wash his face, with plenty to do the next day. Adam quietly left his room, wrapping a towel around his neck and carrying a cup of toothpaste and a toothbrush in hand. Suddenly, he heard a noise ahead and looked up. A dark-haired girl staggered out of her room, clinging to the wall and dragging her feet. Instantly, Adam guessed this was the final housemate. She didn't notice anything around her and was clearly out of it, her flushed face suggesting she was completely drunk. Adam greeted her politely. The girl tried to respond but immediately covered her mouth, trying to hold back from throwing up, and quickly asked to use the bathroom first. Adam didn't even think of objecting. Before she could close the door, she was already kneeling in front of the toilet, throwing up everything in her stomach. After a few minutes, she felt better. The neighbor returned and leaned on the bench to sit more comfortably, perhaps even to sleep in that position. Adam quickly approached and asked if she was okay. Thinking that a man shouldn't get too close to a girl in such a state, he knocked on another neighbor's door, Marcare. Yawning, she opened the door, eyes half closed, and asked why little Adam wasn't asleep at such a late hour. Apologizing for disturbing her, he explained the situation and suggested helping the drunk girl, noting it would be improper for him, a man, to touch her in that state. Yawning wider, Mar waved it off, as this wasn't the first time, saying it was best to leave her there since it was late, and she had to wake up early for work the next morning. A moment later, the door slammed shut in Adam's face. It seemed he was the only one who could help the girl. Returning to the bathroom, he found her in the same position, clearly having fallen asleep. Adam gently lifted her and immediately realized he had discovered a new power, brain overload. He discovered this girl had an F-rank ability that allowed her brain to operate at full capacity for a short period, significantly enhancing her processing power. It seemed the girl wasn't aware of her power, though Adam felt it had great potential. He carefully placed her on the sofa, covered her with his jacket, and thought that this strange girl might think she was very smart and, if she studied well, could become the best. Adam decided to steal the power, planning to return it somehow later. Successfully gaining a new power, Adam smiled at his thoughts, wondering how this would impact him. 2 gems, the mental abilities Brain Overload and Mental Attack, hovered in Sinclair's palm, and the system asked if he wanted to combine them. He said aloud, "Merge," and the gems flew up, leaving colorful trails in the air before colliding and merging into one. The fusion process complete, a red gem fell into the tan-skinned boy's palm. Now, Adam possessed a top-tier ability, Super Brain, capable of automatically launching mental attacks and greatly enhancing his calculation and reasoning abilities. However, this power needed to be used wisely. He thought he might find some clues in the video about the incident where Teresa was injured. The next morning, Adam was awakened by knocking. He yawned widely and opened the door. Once fully awake, he stood stunned by his guest. The beautiful neighbor he had gently laid down yesterday was now standing before him, introducing herself, returning his jacket, and thanking him for his help. Adam stood in silence for a moment, admiring Dolly Romero, then introduced himself in return. He noticed she seemed very innocent. Remembering he had taken her power, though Lily didn't know she had won, he still asked if she felt any discomfort. She smiled sweetly and assured him everything was fine, and there was no need to worry. Taking back his jacket, he smiled back, "Good to hear." Suddenly, the front door burst open, and Adam's plump friend walked into the hallway, loudly greeting him. Lily and Adam immediately turned to see the unexpected guest. The friend's jaw dropped when he saw the beautiful girl, pointing at Adam and shamelessly shouting that Adam had a girlfriend. The tan-skinned boy quickly tried to explain that he was spouting nonsense, as she was just his neighbor. Opening and closing his mouth like a fish, the friend thought he had acted rashly when renting the entire apartment. Instantly, he fixed his hair, firmly clenched his fist, and rearranged his thoughts. George Ripley, that was his name, was Adam's friend and colleague. Extending his hand, he introduced himself to the surprised girl. Politely, she introduced herself and shook his hand, understanding what was happening. As expected, George, not letting go of her hand, immediately invited her for a photo shoot. With his power to photograph and record videos with his hands, he could take some beautiful shots. Lily didn't know how to escape this annoying attention. Luckily, Adam saved her by pulling his friend, impressed by her beauty, away, saying that Ripley had come to pick him up for work, and they were already late. The boy didn't have time to continue the conversation with the beautiful girl, but his attempt was unsuccessful. The Louisville newsroom was bustling with activity. Adam wasted no time and played the desired video on his work computer screen. A hero in a flashy, elaborate costume circled a giant wolf, using his powers to emit long magical ropes from his palms, pinning the beast to the ground. Activating the reasoning abilities of his super brain, the young man focused intently on the screen, analyzing everything he saw with all his might, reading each move and strike. Suddenly, he tensed up, his eyes fixed on a detail. Adam noticed the hero's strange movement, raising a hand to his mouth, thinking it looked very familiar. He didn't have time to fully grasp what he saw before George distracted him with an elbow jab, sitting down beside him and cheerfully asking why Adam didn't take an interest in flirting with girls, especially a pretty one like Lily. Laughing, George assured him that if Adam didn't make a move, he would do it himself. Adam, not appreciating the joke, replied that he and Lily were just neighbors and there was no need to go too far. George said it was easy to go from roommates to bedmates and offered to teach his friend if he didn't know how. Suddenly, a loud noise and screams came from outside the window, signaling the appearance of a monster clinging to the glass. Far from the newsroom building, a portal opened in the sky, and from it emerged a pink-tentacled creature, the one-eyed assassin. Like a giant jellyfish, the monster walked through the city on its tentacles, destroying everything in its path as people fled in panic. The one-eyed assassin descended, its grotesque body slamming down, and at that moment, an announcement blared from the loudspeakers, signaling the appearance of a B-class disaster monster, urging everyone to head to the nearest shelter as heroes were on their way. And indeed, leaping over the destroyed asphalt blocks, one hero appeared on the horizon, a large, strong man in a full-body red suit slowly advancing toward the monster. This was Hot and Sour Noodles, the superhero, urging the residents not to fear as he wouldn't let Louisville be harmed. The crowd suddenly stopped when they heard his familiar voice. It was B-class hero, Hot and Sour Noodles, here to save them. Compared to the one-eyed assassin, the superhero looked very small. George read information about the monster using his power, creating a small virtual screen in his hand. The one-eyed assassin not only had strong defensive capabilities but also mental combat abilities, making it difficult for even 18 spiders to deal with it, and superhero Noodles might lose. The young man looked around and didn't see his friend, thinking Adam had run off quickly. He pointed his camera and smiled, thinking it was time to make some money from his powers, as ordinary people were too weak now. A fire butterfly flew past superhero Hot and Sour Noodles, a C-class hero, a red-haired girl in a tight-fitting suit accentuating her figure, with butterfly wings made of fire. She asked if he needed help. Looking back, he said she came just in time, instructing her to attack the monster while he held it down. Firefly's eyes widened, and she nodded. At that moment, a live hero broadcast was being aired across the city, presented by directors Gregory and Nicholas Rozov. Gregory commented on what was happening in a very calm tone, as if not witnessing a bloody battle but watching a football match. Superhero Hot and Sour Noodles, a close combat fighter, was very selfish and arrogant when he first appeared. His colleague excitedly asked why Gregory had such an opinion. He replied that to activate his powers, the superhero needed to eat a bowl of hot and sour noodles, so he usually appeared after other heroes had exhausted the monster, then finished it off. Nicholas Rozov laughed loudly, saying that as expected from a director, always revealing information others didn't know. He coughed into his fist and suggested stopping the chat to watch the live battle, as things didn't seem to be going well. The superhero jumped up and, as planned, flew straight into the monster's body. He gritted his teeth and elbowed the one-eyed assassin as hard as he could, immediately surrounded by many golden butterflies. Firefly flew closer, yelling at him to move, creating fire in her hands, and aimed straight at the monster. A second later, a powerful stream of fire fell on the alien, pinning it to the ground, its tentacles trembling in pain. The commentators debated, watching the screen, whether the monster's life was ending. Nicholas looked surprised at the director, who doubted the victory, and asked why. He replied that the monster was also smart, showing no signs of worry. The heroes stood close, watching the one-eyed assassin burn in the fire. There was a crack, and the flames broke apart. An unscathed assassin stepped out, changing the color and shape of its body. Superhero Hot and Sour Noodles was furious. The alien had evolved and now had a fire-resistant shield. Firefly, in tears, begged him to try a little harder, as it would take a while for other heroes to arrive. He bowed his head, recalling an important conversation. The boss, sitting behind a desk, lectured the superhero that he had reached the peak of his career as a professional hero. If he wanted to go further and become the most famous star of the company, he couldn't lose, because if he failed, his reputation would drop, and resources would shift to younger heroes. Superhero Hot and Sour Noodles decided never to lose his position in the company. Adam, very close to the action, observed the heroes intently. He noticed that Hot and Sour Noodles, unnoticed by anyone, quickly swallowed a bright blue pill. Adam's eyes widened. He had seen this type of drug once before. At that moment, tentacles wrapped around Firefly in a tight grip. She called for help and struggled to break free. The viewers could clearly see the heroic scene of her being ensnared by the massive tentacles, gradually weakening. Some onlookers commented on the unfolding drama. The one-eyed assassin tossed Firefly high into the air, still bound by his tentacles, and she screamed in agony with her last bit of strength, declaring she didn't want to die. Suddenly, one of the monster's tentacles was sliced in half. The enormous eye looked around, bewildered. It was confused and released its prey. Superhero Hot and Sour Noodles immediately caught Firefly, landing heavily on the asphalt. In the studio, Nicholas Rodorf slammed the table in delight. He shouted into the microphone with admiration that this superhero could only fight for 15 minutes, but this time he endured and became stronger than before. A young boy jumped out of his seat and raised his fist in victory, cheering that the superhero was still in his prime. Gregory adjusted his tie, appearing embarrassed by his earlier judgment, muttering that this was quite unexpected. Before he could finish his sentence, his colleagues' eyes were glued to the screen, yelling that the one-eyed assassin was attacking Hot and Sour Noodles. Now, the alien and the superhero faced each other. The one-eyed monster charged at its opponent first, but its tentacles collided with a bright blue light, the superpower of Hot and Sour Noodles. He flew forward, crackling with electricity, and taunted, asking if that was all the monster could do. Something was happening. The superhero decided to finish off the one-eyed assassin with his signature move. The monster's eye widened in double shock at what was about to unfold. The spicy kick of doom hit its mark with a direct blow, sending the superhero flying backward. Landing on the asphalt without looking back, he knew that behind him, the alien was being torn apart by his superpower. Suddenly, he doubled over, blood gushing from his mouth, and Hot and Sour Noodles collapsed to the ground, his head slumping. The long-defeated monster, torn in half, was gone, and his teammates rushed to the fallen hero. But the victor suddenly sprang back up, veins bulging on his face, and his eyes blazing. Firefly, horrified, screamed and grabbed her senior's shoulder, asking what had happened, but he didn't respond, gritting his teeth, trying to control himself. Seconds later, Hot and Sour Noodles calmed down, grinned sheepishly, and scratched his head, telling Firefly he was fine, just overexerted his power. She relaxed, though he had genuinely scared her. The two heroes walked away like they were on the red carpet, with the joyous and grateful crowd cheering behind them and declaring their love with all their might. Adam, who had been watching the battle from a hiding spot, prepared to leave as things wrapped up, thinking he had completely forgotten about the blue pill and that he would need to prepare the news. At that moment, out of the corner of his eye, he saw something moving next to the body of the defeated alien. He turned and stared. It turned out that inside the dead man's womb was a tiny clone of the one-eyed assassin. Adam realized too late that the clone was making long strides toward him. Its physical and elemental defenses were too strong, perhaps its weakness lay in mental attacks. The clone, getting closer to the dark-haired man, threatened to seek revenge on humanity and absorb all his energy once it found a host. Suddenly, the clone's gaze fixed on Adam, choosing him as its host. He didn't seem worried, just surprised that the clone had been sent here. The dark-haired man smiled. Well, if the prey is in hand, learning its powers might be worth it. Sinclair extended his arms, activating his power-stealing ability. The small monster halted as it sensed external power, and in the next second, its head fell to the ground, dead. The stream of energy did not escape Firefly's notice. She immediately recognized someone was using their power. Adam grabbed the corpse of the one-eyed assassin and squeezed it in his palm. Fortunately, it was just a weak clone, but even its weakness had mental attack capabilities. A mental attack from a Class Y individual couldn't instantly kill a monster. He began to drain its power, and soon, a blue gem floated in his hand. The power easily left the alien's body and hovered above his palm. A Class B ability, Fire Shield, granting immunity to fire attacks below Class B, significantly enhancing physical defense, was a very useful power for someone taking hits. Adam rejoiced, realizing his entire body was glowing brightly, indicating that this power indeed worked like an invisible shell covering his whole body. He held 2 gems, orange and blue, in his hands, pondering that no matter how strong a power was, it always had a weakness. This common saying in the world of powers seemed to have no effect on him. Meanwhile, Firefly flew low over the houses, searching for the energy source. Adam heard her shout and quickly hid around the corner, not yet ready for the heroes to discover him. The girl, disappointed, sat down on the asphalt, not far from him. She felt a strong psychic energy here and was sure she had seen someone. A man wearing a mechanical rooster mask emerged from the shadows, walking toward her. His entire body was covered by a long cloak with a golden clasp, asking if she was looking for him. Firefly turned around and, in turn, asked if he had just used his power. Sinclair stepped into the light, walking through puddles with his metallic outfit. His mask reflected in the water, glistening under the sun. They stood quite a distance apart. The girl cautiously asked if the stranger was a hero, as she had never seen him before. Tossing the clone of the one-eyed assassin aside like a ball, Adam said he was just a passerby helping her clean up. Firefly stared in shock at the alien corpse at her feet, which could indeed be a clone of the one-eyed assassin. Looking at the stranger, she thought it was incredible that he could take down such a strong and dangerous monster in an instant. But he wasn't a hero and shouldn't use his powers without permission. Adam was about to step forward and politely ask for permission, but the heroine held up her hand, signaling him to stop. She pressed her chest against his cloak and yelled that he was using powers illegally, meaning he had to come with her to the Hero Association for inspection. Sinclair, surprised, frowned behind his mask. He asked Firefly if she really thought she could stop him. The heroine immediately flew into the air, radiating flames. The stranger's actions were against the power law, and by law, she had the right to act against him. Fire butterflies surrounded Adam, who asked if this was what heroes should do to ordinary people. Suddenly, he grabbed the wing of one of the butterflies. In the next moment, the heroine watched in shock as the stranger crushed it in his hand. All that was left of the defeated butterfly was smoke. Turning to the girl, he was now ready to attack. The plan succeeded, and in a second, Firefly was high in the sky. As she flew away, she screamed an apology, saying it wasn't her fault and there was no need to kill her. Adam's memories flashed back to the moment superhero Hot and Sour Noodles swallowed the blue pill, and the hero's gesture on the ice. Were they doing the same thing? He removed his mask and muttered to himself that he would definitely uncover the whole truth. The quiet of the night in Louisville was broken by the sound of an overhead train. Adam sat on a bench, thinking he needed to stop accumulating powers. Need to focus on developing brain reset abilities. He closed his eyes, fully immersed in thoughts of finding information about the blue pill. He heard a man's voice very close by. Opening his eyes, Adam instinctively reached for the seat next to him, where his backpack had been, but it was empty. He trembled and for a few seconds couldn't understand what had happened. He jumped up, trying to find the thief, as his backpack contained his rooster costume. The thief was surely the man in the coat who had just walked by. Sinclair scanned the entire car. The thief couldn't have disappeared because the station wasn't close. Maybe someone had invisibility powers, but what about their scent? Adam activated Brain Reboot, enhanced senses, and immediately identified the smell of the backpack emanating from a nearby guy. But the stranger's aura and clothes were completely different. This meant it wasn't invisibility, perhaps it was another ability to change appearance. However, Adam wasn't angry at all, as this ability came to him naturally and would be very useful. Sinclair persistently followed the slick-haired thief through the nighttime streets, keeping a safe distance. The pink-haired thief whistled something between his teeth. Today was a harvest day. Suddenly, he looked up at the sky, feeling strange and anxious. The thief turned abruptly and saw the same passenger from whom he had stolen the backpack. How could the guy have spotted him and even started following him? Without much thought, the stranger ran fast. Today was clearly a bad day. The nearest hiding place was a public restroom. The dark-haired man pushed the door open forcefully and loudly asked the thief if he intended to use childish tricks to hide in a stall when he was weak. There were no stalls in the men's restroom and no strangers inside either. He looked at the pink sign. The thief had indeed gone into the women's restroom. Adam knocked on the stall door, hearing movement from inside, and called him out, only to hear a scream from within, calling him a pervert. Adam kicked the door open. Apparently, he liked doing things the opposite way. From inside the stall, a female figure appeared, toilet paper, and even a makeup kit flying at him, all accompanied by cries for help. The dark-haired man, confused, peeled off layer after layer of paper, amazed at the thief's ability to even change his voice. Sitting hunched on the toilet seat, the person looked at him, but now dressed as a woman, with a low-cut top, short skirt, and high heels, apologizing, saying it was their first time shapeshifting. Adam, disappointed, said the power couldn't change bodies or appearances. The thief almost cried, lamenting their bad luck. With a guilty look, they handed the backpack back to its owner, even trying to smile to diffuse the conflict. The first thing Sinclair did was open the backpack and ensure that his belongings were still there. Hovering over the stranger, he seriously asked if they had looked inside, to which they stammered, saying they hadn't. Adjusting his glasses on his nose, the dark-haired man advised them to find a normal job and become a good person in the future. Sitting on the toilet and clasping hands as if in prayer, the thief promised never to steal again and thanked him for saving their life this time. The answer was Adam's low, threatening voice and his disappointment. No one intended to forgive them. The restroom stall lit up with a bright blue light, blinding the thief. As Adam stepped out of the restroom and tossed a red gem into his palm, he remembered he had promised not to accumulate more powers, but now he couldn't resist this temptation. Class F power. Change clothes anytime, allowing the user to switch outfits with a wave of the hand, complete with storage space. Sinclair didn't hesitate and immediately used this ability on himself, stepping out of the building in a new and expensive suit, changing his hairstyle, and removing his glasses. Looking around, he smiled, finding this power incredibly convenient and useful. 2 cops stood at the exit, responding to a citizen's report of someone screaming in the women's restroom. Adam pointed towards the restroom and said he'd heard the scream, and even saw a pervert disguised in there. Watching the half-naked thief being taken away by the police, Adam thought that some people have powers but don't deserve them and that this definitely needs fixing. A week passed, and the club's music echoed through the quiet night as Adam arrived by taxi. He stepped out and slammed the door. He was summoned to the meeting by George, who greeted his friend nearby. The dark-haired man asked what was so important that he had to come here. As cheerful as ever, Ripley put an arm around him and mysteriously asked him to guess who he just saw in the nightclub. Adam mumbled something, and his friend responded with a mischievous grin that his girlfriend Lily was working there as a cleaner. The dark-haired man squinted and asked him to stop calling his neighbor his girlfriend. Approaching the door, George's excitement didn't wane. Instead, he insisted Adam would understand everything when he saw the performance for himself. The loud music and darkness mixed with blinding lights made Sinclair squint as they entered the club. Ripley led him to the nearest table. In a human-sized cage, wearing a revealing bunny costume, was Lily Romoro, dancing. Every move of her dance included a clear flick of the bunny tail against the pole. She was the first to notice them entering and was stunned. She slowed down a bit, panicking about what her neighbor was doing there. Adam sat down with his hands on his knees, while George calmly sipped his cocktail and consoled his friend. "Don't be sad, there are plenty of beauties in the world, and today you're on George's turf, so sit back and relax." There were sofas around each table, forming a square for more people, so he raised his hand and loudly called someone over. 3 chubby waitresses looked at them, waving seductively. George introduced them to Adam one by one, then pointed at Sinclair himself and introduced the girls. They immediately surrounded the handsome young man with compliments while George stayed on the sidelines. Meanwhile, at the next table, someone slammed a bottle down. A young man, squirming and hugging the beautiful waitresses, complained that his brother had taken him, McLaren, away and made him lose to the kid Frank. To his right was a couple, a local girl and a red-haired man named Mac O'Borse, the young man's bodyguard. Mac replied that he simply lost the race and shouldn't blame the car. His drunken companion now laughed hysterically. Zachary Webb placed his hands on the girl's shoulders and said the man only became his bodyguard because he couldn't communicate with his father. At that moment, Lily quietly approached to pour more wine into his glass. Squinting, Zachary looked at the man playfully and asked if it was because he couldn't keep his mouth shut. The man laughed broadly and responded that, as a Class C hero, why should his master worry about such things? The mocking expression immediately vanished from the young man's face, and he clicked his tongue in disgust. Zachary jumped up and, in a sudden fit of rage, slapped Lily, cursing why they had such staff here. The girl couldn't stand and fell, hitting the sofa, with another's handprint on her cheek. Webb angrily asked why they served such terrible wine. The young man's red face twisted as if he couldn't believe they made him drink this stale water. Immediately, he leaned towards the dancer and poured the bottle's contents over her head. Adam wanted to rescue the girl, but George held him back, saying his friend couldn't take on these people. The young master was the second son of a mechanical hero from the Berkshire Company, and his bodyguard was a Class C hero, Flemingfest. Sinclair, furious, shook off his friend's hand and muttered that he knew all this and was heading to the restroom. Lily sobbed, unable to stand, her hair and face sticky with liquor and her cheeks still stinging from the slap. Zachary sat down, hugging the girls around him, his eyes resting on the table with several new bottles of wine, knowing they'd need to apologize. He added to the manager that the girl at fault should be punished thoroughly, and the bar manager, knowing well who the young man was, complied without question, loudly cheering him on. The people present watched as he forced strong liquor down Lily's throat. Immediately, a masked hero in a chicken suit pushed him away from her. Lily Romero crawled on all fours, coughing up the bitter liquid and gasping for air. Adam approached the young master and his cronies, stating he was aware of the presence of the mechanical hero's son. Zachary continued to pour the liquor carelessly, muttering mockingly that the stranger was surely going to die today. His bodyguards surrounded him, with the red-haired menace stepping forward, showing concern for the young man. The rooster sat on the sofa, crossing his legs, and then his arms, making an offer to Zachary. Hearing the stranger's words, Zachary's interest was piqued, and he blinked sleepily. The bodyguard, worried, told the young master it was quite late and they should head home. For this, the man immediately received a bottle to the head. Zachary threw dirt at him without hesitation, yelling that he wasn't going anywhere because there was an offer on the table. He swallowed his pride, gritted his teeth, and knew that talking back to the shameless guy meant losing his job. Wade stood up and staggered over to Sinclair, asking what the offer was. However, a flaming fist touched his shoulder, inviting him to sit down and take a rest. Looking at Adam with a threatening gaze, he assured him that he himself would talk to this guy. While swirling the whiskey in his glass in circles, he giggled behind his mask, really wanting to attack the guy even though he was the one against violence. However, since the bodyguard had prevented him from discussing important matters with his boss, the chicken hero was ready to teach the flaming fist a lesson. He slowly stood up from his chair, the boasting man urging him forward. The bodyguard tightened his bandage and said he didn't know who would teach whom a lesson, with bright sparks surrounding him. A moment later, the fire gently flowed into his fist, and the hero said pitifully that the stranger was really unlucky to have angered him. Adam immediately recognized that the bodyguard's ability was a Class C elemental fire attack. Bar patrons, mixed with staff, watched the scene from a distance, mostly rooting for the chicken hero, saying it was brave to challenge a student of a Class A hero. Lily was protected by a colleague who offered to help, while the crowd buzzed about why the guys were fighting and whether the chicken hero could defeat the flamethrower. The latter wasted no time and charged at his opponent, swinging his fiery fists. Seeing that his opponent didn't move, a hint of worry crossed the man's mind. Was this a trap? Adam deftly shrugged off the attack as the fire grazed his face and sarcastically asked if that was all he had. The bodyguard bared his teeth. Since becoming a hero, no enemy or wild beast had ever withstood his attack. In the next second, he raised his fist, and the fire spread even more than before, completely engulfing the chicken hero. The crowd stepped back in fear, sure the hero would burn someone alive. Meanwhile, Sinclair was completely surrounded by flames, only his silhouette visible. But in the next moment, a gloved hand appeared in the fire. Following it, the owner stepped out, the flames, like a pet, spreading obediently to the sides. Fuentes covered his face with his hand, nearly burned by his own power, looking at his opponent in confusion. He was still unharmed. Adam raised his hand and activated his mental attack ability. The bodyguard's eyes turned white, his mouth opened in a silent scream, and he went pale. Taking advantage of the hero's stupor, the chicken hero waved his hand and struck the back of his neck with the edge of his palm. The flaming fist fell instantly and passed out. Suddenly snapping out of it, Saker jumped off his chair, praising that the flaming fist was taken down with just one punch. Sinclair knelt on one knee and extracted a skill from the defeated opponent. Class C skill, Flame Struck, can create fire in your hands, perfect for a chef. The rooster guy stood up and slowly approached Webb. Terrified, Webb climbed onto the sofa, balancing on both legs, shaking his head frantically for protection. With a gentle chuckle, the rooster decided to talk to the stranger, asking what kind of deal he wanted and offering to pay immediately if needed. Adam quietly grabbed Webb's neck and lifted him off the floor. Webb squirmed desperately, starting to threaten that he would tell his father. When the rooster said he knew who his father was, the boy tried to pry the hand off his neck, threatening that if he got killed, his father wouldn't spare them. The rooster gently placed him back on the floor and leaned close to his ear, whispering that he didn't intend to kill him, just wanted to share something. Looking deep into Webb's eyes, the rooster asked if he wanted to have that skill. Webb froze, not believing his ears. The rooster let go, and Webb breathed easier. Unable to stand properly, he collapsed and started rubbing his bruised neck, thinking the jerk believed he was some god who could grant skills. Adam threw a piece of paper on the floor and, as he left, said that if Webb wanted the skill, he should come to this address alone within 7 days. Sinclair, after changing his outfit using his ability, went outside and immediately received a call from George, who was at the club and yelled, asking where he had gone. He replied that the bar was too loud and he needed to step out to catch his breath. Ripley's joyous laughter echoed from the other end, and Adam realized he had missed an epic performance. His friend promised to show him everything and even invited the black-haired girl for kebabs. Sinclair looked up at one of the city's skyscrapers, shining brightly over the empty streets, thinking that the first part of the plan was complete. Now, he just needed Zachary to fall into the trap and start investigating the heroes from within the Berkshire Company to uncover the truth faster. Meanwhile, at the Berkshire Heroes office, a discussion was taking place among part of the team. 3 heroes, led by one leader, sat around a large P-shaped table, all 4 staring at the big screen in front of them, where a masked chicken guy faced off against Class C hero, Fumenfest. The mechanical hero sat at the head of the table, a silver-haired man in red and gold attire with unique different-colored eyes, arms crossed, demanding everyone's thoughts on the matter. Hero Glazer Adventurer, a young man with blue hair and matching outfit, spoke first, saying that the masked guy used his hands like knives to handle Flamboxer in an instant, possibly having abilities above Class B. Hero Leslie Swordsman, a tall man with a high ponytail and a long scar over his left eye, disagreed, stating that what killed Michael Borst wasn't the hands. Michael lost the moment the masked guy acted. The third hero, Ethan Barton, with black eyes and blue horns on his head, suggested checking the evaluation department's report on Flamboxer's injuries. He was the first to read what was written, his black eyes widening in disbelief. The other heroes were immediately stunned, staring at the paperwork. The skill of Flamboxer had disappeared. It seemed they were facing a big problem. The mechanical hero sighed and stared intently at the screen. The lazy swordsman posed the question that no one was sure about: where did someone come from who could erase other skills? Ethan responded that, based on his experience, only one hero of that class had such an ability. The mechanical hero looked around the company and asked Barton if he trusted his judgment. Glacier Adventurer even jumped out of his seat, exclaiming that it was impossible, that old tool, with 1 foot in the grave, couldn't appear now. Ethan had to admit that Berkshire couldn't handle this problem alone, they'd have to report to the Hero Association. The lazy swordsman objected, saying that someone with such a special skill, regardless of the company, would be used as a killing machine, so no one should report him. The mechanical hero rubbed his temples tiredly and suggested that they shouldn't be the first to report this, keeping it a company secret, then asked everyone to disperse to think it over. The next morning, in a massive mansion, the residence of young Master Zachary Well, he lay in bed clutching the paper the masked guy had thrown, wondering if he could get at least one skill. Rereading the address, he muttered in despair that the guy had offered a deal, meaning he needed something. Zachary clutched the paper and smiled, thinking that in just a few days, he'd have a skill, and nothing else mattered. Adam called George to the Lubell Museum, and when his friend, surprised, asked what they were doing there, Sinclair replied that he wanted to learn more about monsters to escape them more easily and wondered if he could extract a skill from a Class C monster. Ripley whispered in his friend's ear, pointing at the girls passing by, "You didn't come here to learn about monsters, but to check out the babes, right? Everyone knows this museum is full of hot girls." But Adam ignored his friend's teasing and pointed to the side. "I came here for this." An electric Tyrannosaurus, a Class C monster, 7 meters tall and 12 meters long, appeared at the start, sending electricity everywhere and causing many disasters, paralyzing the entire city. Thanks to it, 6 Class A heroes, 13 Class B heroes, and 27 Class C heroes had to sacrifice themselves. Looking at the giant monster, Adam said he planned to write an article about the monster invasion. The mechanical mouth of the Tyrannosaurus remained wide open, just like when they finally defeated it through extraordinary efforts and many sacrifices. George was in awe. "This monster is insanely strong." Sinclair approached, as if mesmerized, reaching out, "If I could extract this terrible skill." A museum guard immediately rushed over, waving his stick threateningly. Adam showed his press card and said he wanted to write an article about the monster. The guard examined the card and warned that in the museum, you could only look with your eyes, not touch. At that moment, George winked at his friend. George started chatting with the guard, pulling him into the hallway and asking where the most beautiful girls were. The guard immediately questioned his sanity. Finally, Adam returned to his plan and reached out to the monster again, activating the skill extraction process. Familiar electric pulses coursed through his body, but Adam realized that extracting this skill was no easy task. Eventually, he succeeded, and a soft purple gem appeared in his hand. Yet, something strange was afoot. He had learned an E-rank skill, electricity, which could create an electric ball and also charge a phone. Staring at the gem, Sinclair wondered, how did I extract an E-rank skill from an S-rank monster? Has this mighty creature really lost its skill from being dormant for so long? Maybe the last time Adam extracted a high-level skill from a monster, it was because it was still alive. He thought, looks like I can't get anything cool from this museum, but I still need to keep searching. When he returned to his room, the sun had set, painting the sky in pastel hues. Adam placed his spoils on the table. After scouring the museum, he only acquired 3 low-rank skills. 3 gems, 2 red and 1 purple, glowed and radiated their unique abilities. The first skill was F-rank, duplication, which could create a clone that lasted 1 minute and could also turn on lights. The second was the E-rank electricity skill, able to create an electric ball and charge a phone. The third skill was F-rank, mind control, which could make anyone care about you, but you probably shouldn't use it for evil, right? Frustrated, he rested his chin on his hand, thinking these powers were too weak. But if skills could be combined, they could also be destroyed. Adam lifted the golden gem, the C-rank fire skill, to eye level, pondering its use for his next mission. He yelled, "Destroy!" The gem burned in his hand, vibrating slightly, but nothing happened. Adam decided not to give up and tried again. This time, something happened. The gem began to crack, and the skill was destroyed. On the table before Sinclair lay several small, glowing black cubes of varying sizes. Level 1, Dark Magic, Basic Material, Perfect Squares, and Indestructible. Adam held one cube close to his eye, contemplating that skills were created from these cubes and that he could actually destroy a skill. He started to think about the possibility of breaking down a skill into its most basic components, these black energy cubes. One hand holding the cube, the other the red gem. In theory, he could use these black energy cubes to upgrade his skills. Driven by his thoughts, Sinclair connected the 2 items, and the skill indeed got upgraded. The E-rank skill, Mind Control, now offered mental access to the target, the ability to deceive people, allowing for involvement in con games. Adam couldn't believe his luck. If skills could really be upgraded, he might create an S-rank skill. His thoughts were interrupted by a scream from the hallway. His neighbor, Lily Romoro, was yelling for someone to leave her alone and not to touch her. Adam thought Zachary Webb had come to visit the girl last night, but surprisingly, her uninvited guests were her parents. Her mother stood aside while her father, swearing at full volume, sat on the sofa smoking, while their daughter sobbed beside them. Her father took a drag and exhaled a thick plume of smoke, saying he hadn't intended to deceive his daughter. Sinclair left at that moment, quietly closing the door. The man yelled again, "If it weren't for this, my daughter wouldn't be sending money home." Her mother chimed in, "Lily's brother needs money for a house and car, and to get married, all of which costs $1 million. Where would we get that kind of money?" Lily immediately stopped crying and clenched her fists, realizing her parents had lied to her, saying her father was sick and needed money urgently. A fresh wave of tears streamed down her face as she asked in despair if they knew how much she had suffered hearing about her father's illness. Covering her face with her hands, Lily bitterly whispered that she had worked for shifts from morning till night just to earn money as quickly as possible. Her father exhaled a puff of smoke and indifferently said the family's first thought was for their daughter to send all she could, and he would handle the rest later, as Lily's family line couldn't end with them. The girl defiantly asked if this was just a way to bring her home and sell her to a man she didn't even know. Her mother held her daughter's hand, sobbing, and said that although the man wasn't well educated, he was honest and kind and wouldn't treat her badly. Lily jerked her hand away forcefully, yelling if her parents ever thought about where the $50,000 she sent last week came from. Choking back angry tears, she confessed that she had worked as a waitress and a maid and even became a barmaid to earn that money. Her parents stared at her in stunned silence, as if struck by lightning. Her father jumped off the sofa, pointing at Lily, lamenting that she had ruined the family's reputation. He hit her, throwing a tantrum, and threatened to beat her, but she turned her head and retorted defiantly that her customers hit harder than her own father. At that moment, Aram jumped up and caught the man's hand, saying he could discuss anything with his daughter. The man turned around in disbelief, as if someone dared to interrupt him, spat at Aram's feet, and said he had no right to interfere when he was punishing his daughter. Sinclair wisely noticed that the man showed no remorse for what had happened, the only regret was in the mother's eyes. Adam decided to take drastic action, to help and see if he could assist Lily, so he activated the E-rank skill, Mind Control. The mother, as if possessed by someone, slapped her husband across the face. He staggered and fell to the ground, now being scolded by his wife that their daughter had become a barmaid and that he had a heart of stone. She ran to embrace Lily, both crying, apologizing for offending her because she was her beloved daughter. The man, still on his knees, sighed, "Well then, Lily's brother will have to fend for himself." Adam remembered his unfortunate sister, whose life depended on medical devices. Everything would be fine as long as people understood in time. Who in this world wouldn't feel compassion for their family? The next morning, Adam and Lily escorted her parents to the train station. She waved through the window, telling them to be careful and promising to come home for the new year. Her mom waved back, telling her not to do anything reckless again. Adam held a drink in his hand, and his neighbor thanked him for accompanying her, saying he could head home. Sinclair handed her the drink, expressing hope that her brother would come to his senses and be more useful than any money she sent him. Lily winked mischievously, beckoning him closer to tell him something, making him blush but still obeying her request. Next thing he knew, Romero planted a grateful kiss on his lips. She then whispered another thank you to her neighbor. Evening fell over the city, and Adam, dressed in his trusty rooster costume, made his way to a tall building, a monster corpse processing center with tight security. This place stored many monster corpses, making it easier for him to acquire new skills. A large truck pulled up, heading into the building, and a thought flashed through Sinclair's mind: there was only one special way to get in. Without waiting for the truck to stop, he slid his shoes against the ground, bending backward. Under the truck, along its entire perimeter, were structures like bars, and Adam grabbed one tightly with both hands. A deep sigh came from beneath his mask, but he realized he wasn't the only one in such a peculiar place. Right in front of him was a girl's face, and the stranger signaled him to stay quiet. Adam obeyed without a word, surprised by this unexpected companion, who was also trying to break into the center. Initially, due to the darkness, he couldn't make out who was in front of him, but the close proximity to a woman's chest dispelled any doubts. He stammered a greeting, commenting on their shared luck. The stranger frowned and whispered, "What a damn coincidence, she's unlucky enough to bump into you here. Now she has to play by the rules and trust in her skills." The girl introduced herself as Regina Craig, a representative of the Tespil Chamber of Commerce, and asked who Adam was. Regina looked through her mask sunglasses, mentioning they'd soon reach the unloading area but couldn't leave the truck just yet. Unexpectedly, Sinclair grabbed her waist, telling her to hold on to him, and pushed her aside, rolling out from under the truck. They landed on the ground, with Adam taking the brunt of the impact, but still not letting go of his newfound companion. Realizing she wasn't moving, he gently asked how long she planned to hold on to him. Regina stood up, stepping back, and replied that if it wasn't necessary, who would want to hug him? Finally, they reached the monster corpse processing room. Adam carefully followed the girl, who noticed and asked why he was acting like he'd never seen anything like this before, probably new to the whole thing. Sinclair bowed his head, admitting her insight, which pleased her, so Craig let him follow. They entered a large room where a defeated monster lay on a big metal table, a werewolf with a strong, furry body. Regina said her boss wanted the white fur on the werewolf's chest, and she carefully cut it out. Then, she pulled out a strangely shaped bag from somewhere. Proudly, she told Adam this was her ability, storage bag, which could hold many items. Adam thought this was a quirky cosmic power. Regina turned back and called Sinclair to the next processing room, but he was busy extracting a skill from the werewolf. He successfully obtained a rank D skill, metal manipulation, which could change the shape of any metal, a dream for any auto garage owner. Suddenly, loud noises erupted, making Adam jump, and the girl too. The alarm had gone off, and they were discovered. A staff member in white appeared at the door, shouting and sobbing that the monster wasn't dead. The duo stood still, watching the scene unfold. Giant tentacles pierced through the door, grabbing the man and dragging him away, leaving him only time to scream for help. It seemed the danger had passed for Regina and Adam, who stood still while the girl leaned on his shoulder, asking him to hold her as her legs would go weak from what she had just witnessed. But the joy didn't last long. She felt something slimy touch her shoulder. Before she could scream, a tentacle dragged her away. The guy reached out, trying to grab the unlucky girl. He quickly summoned his violent fire skill, but the tentacle pulled her too fast, and his fireball couldn't catch up. Leaping over another obstacle, the guy noticed something. All the metal pillars had a green gem, and his metal manipulation skill began to float in his hand. Some metallic objects turned into tentacles and moved towards Regina, their sharp tips cutting the tentacle holding her. She fell to the ground, painfully colliding with the floor. Sinclair rushed over, asking if she was okay. The girl sat up, complaining that the tentacles had hooks that scratched her, tearing her shirt, nearly revealing a breast. A loud roar echoed, and they turned to see the monster revived, a massive skull with fangs and numerous tentacles. Dozens of tentacles grabbed the center staff, twisting and screaming in pain and fear. Regina stared in disbelief, her mouth agape, as the skull slightly turned and spotted them, immediately launching several tentacles at the duo. Adam summoned metal manipulation again. The skull rose to the high ceiling, aiming its tentacles at everyone. The guy began to attack the monster with a huge metal shield, connecting many pillars. Regina looked up, horrified, as the shield thinned under the monster's pressure, shouting for her friend to find another way. In a panic, she covered her head with her hands, screaming frantically that she would die and be devoured. Adam mulled over what to do, knowing this couldn't go on forever. He remembered seeing some gas cans earlier. Trying to comfort Regina, he told her not to be scared because he had an idea. The guy pushed the shield in front of him and summoned metal tentacles using his skill. Following behind were the gas cans he had spotted before. They all flew straight toward the monster's skull. Adam ordered the small gem accompanying the tentacles to explode. An ear-splitting blast echoed. Thanks to the gas, fire spread in multiple directions. The guy grabbed the girl's hand and ran, urging everyone else to flee too. They seemed to escape the fierce flames, but suddenly a strange man blocked their path, holding some kind of weapon on his back. Looking sternly at the duo, he asked if they were the thieves who had revived the monster to attack the center. Adam stayed silent, but Regina put her hand on her hip and began berating the man, demanding who he was and why he was spouting nonsense right after appearing. He called her a disrespectful child, saying that at her age, she should still be drinking milk. Unfazed, Regina grew angrier, retorting that he was behaving disrespectfully, even for an old man. But then Adam recognized the man and loudly exclaimed his name, Thomas Conley, the hero who had defeated Ken Conversorca 10 years ago. The man smirked, and the guy became more respectful, saying he would take care of everything once he finished off the monster. Adam was surprised to see such a legendary hero in the Monster Corp's processing center. Thomas drew his weapon and used the North Star Attack, Style 1, Greedy Wolf Strike. A ghostly blue wolf lunged, slicing through the tentacles. The duo watched in awe at the hero's actions. Adam noticed that, as expected from the legendary North Star Attack, each technique was a high-level move. Even those with S-rank skills would step back a few paces. A roar came from the monster skull, and Thomas leaped toward its head, severed tentacles scattered across the hallway. The hero summoned his skill, North Star Attack, Style 2, Sky's Hunger. Pushing aside, he saw that the skull had lost its tentacles, only the severed pieces flailing in rage. Finally, he unleashed water from above, thrusting his katana and the water stream toward the monster. The space trembled, and after a few seconds, Sinclair saw the monster defeated. Thomas fell to one knee. Behind him were splattered blood remnants all over the hallway, all that was left of the alien. The hero pointed his katana at Adam, saying it was now time to deal with the boy, immediately recognizing the determined and murderous look in his eyes. Sinclair tried to convince the older hero that they hadn't revived the monster. The man, unmoved, replied that it was nonsense, as the duo looked too suspicious. Regina whispered nervously to Adam, asking if he was confident in defeating this old man. He replied that he couldn't, but she wanted to. The girl shook her head and said she wanted to lend him a weapon. She handed him armor made from B-rank monster material and ran off, shouting that the armor would be helpful and she would support him. Adam, after inspecting the item, smirked, thinking it was crazy. Regina reminded him of Teresa. Without warning, Thomas attacked the boy, raising his katana. Luckily, Sinclair reacted in the nick of time. He raised his arm, and the armor Regina had given him deflected the attack, surprising the older hero. Even Adam was amazed at the armor's strong defensive capability. Thomas didn't give up and continuously swung his weapon, getting closer to the boy. With a heavy sigh, he activated his skill, Brain Restart. This skill slowed down the hero's movements in front of Adam. Staring at Thomas through his mask, the boy thought that after activating Brain Restart, the attack seemed slower, but still not enough to defeat him. Yelling in anger, the old hero began charging at the boy with double the strength. Even in slow motion, the boy realized he had no time to dodge. He was forced to use an extreme measure, the human control skill. The old man realized things were not going as planned when he couldn't control his movements in midair. He exclaimed in disbelief, asking the boy if he had stopped his movements. Both opponents fell to the ground. Adam calmly said he would be in danger if he didn't do so. Thomas, refusing to accept defeat, charged again with his sword ready, asking if this was all the little thieves could do. Adam used metal manipulation again, and a complete staff appeared from the small object in his hand. The two heroes battled throughout the night. Sinclair's eyes, hidden under the mask, focused intently on the old man. Each of his attacks was powerful. Human control could be used to stop him briefly so Adam wouldn't be cut in half. The staff at the center watched the battle, coming up with theories about the origins of the man in the chicken mask. If he could fight Thomas Conley, he might be the god-tier hero of the Six Weapons District. Regina overheard and wondered who this weapon god was. Thomas paused, drew his weapon, and pondered the boy's attacks, realizing he might not be a thief. The masked man hid his katana behind his back and ordered everyone to leave the processing area because he wanted to talk to the chicken masked man alone. The staff blinked in surprise and asked if everyone really had to leave. The hero's eyes flashed dangerously, and someone dared to defy the director of the center. Regina and the others ran towards the exit, shouting that she would wait for Adam outside. The two men were left alone. The boy asked the older hero what he wanted from him, to which the man replied that he knew the boy wasn't the weapon god since his skills didn't compare to the gods. Only the metal skills were somewhat similar. But someone like Adam, with many skills, wouldn't come to the center just to steal some scraps. Thomas squinted and seriously asked the boy if he was here looking for the secrets of the world. Sinclair, not appearing surprised, thought to himself, what secrets of the world? What's this guy talking about? I need to find out more from him. He decided to lie and said he was indeed searching for the world's secrets. The man suddenly laughed heartily and exclaimed that it would be great to share such secrets with a young, ambitious, and strong person like him. Pointing to the side, the hero confessed that the real purpose of creating the center was to open a one-way tunnel to the monster world. This tunnel was called the White Hole. Fortunately, the chicken mask skillfully hid Adam's emotions. What he heard left him astounded. 15 years ago, the White Hole was successfully discovered in Louisville. The Hero Association sent a small team of top-tier heroes on a special mission to infiltrate the monster world, and Thomas was among them. During this mission, many S-class heroes died. Only he and two others returned because they risked their lives. The man said that every monster corpse processing center was actually built at the Earth's weakest points. By continuing to burn monster corpses at these weak points, they could open a white hole leading to the monster world. Adam nodded towards the monster corpse with tentacles and asked what happened to it, why it was still alive. Thomas said this was not to be mentioned outside, that it was actually a mutation of a monster that had touched the white hole. People on this planet were like beasts hunted by monsters, and only by gathering the strongest qualities of humanity could they have a chance of winning. The old hero turned to Adam and told him he could leave. Regardless of which organization he belonged to, he had to remember he was part of humanity. It turned out their conversation was being eavesdropped on by powerful individuals. A beautiful red-haired woman stood next to the chair the old man was sitting in, disgustedly saying that old Thomas Connell continued to do foolish things. How could he say those things to the outside world? The man calmly replied that even if he didn't tell, sooner or later, other organizations would know, and it was impossible to keep the world secret within a narrow scope. The woman asked if the online meeting from headquarters was here, with over 25 people qualified to be considered S-class cases. They moved from the window to the screens, carefully observing those on them. This was what the Louisville Hero Association had to say. And, looking at each other, they began the meeting. The main issue on the agenda was whether to tell the truth to the Hero Association's Beyond A rank. Adam returned to the hospital to visit his comatose sister, as he often did, sitting beside her and talking, not knowing if she could hear him. Calling her name, he said he had learned a bitter truth today. Earlier, after talking to the hero, Sinclair left the processing area and walked into another room where a noisy crowd was wondering what was happening inside, whether the boy had really beaten Thomas, and why only he came out. The boy first approached Regina. She asked if everything was okay, knowing he couldn't let others know about his abilities. He replied that everything was fine and asked her to come closer and look into his eyes. The confused girl complied. As expected, Adam used his human control ability on her. Regina's consciousness blurred, and her vision became fuzzy. The chicken-masked man ordered her to forget that he used fire and metal powers and to think that the armor he gave her was to protect her and that she owed him 10,000 dong. Then Adam snapped his fingers. Regina woke up as if from a dream, quickly saying she was glad everything was okay with the boss and that she had a curfew at home, so she had to leave and ran off. Remembering these events, sitting in the hospital room, Adam smiled at his sister. Craig was very much like her, sweet and money-loving. Stroking Teresa's cold cheek, he said that after avenging her, he would find a way to wake her up. Full of determination, he went home after sunset, sat at the table, ready to experiment with his abilities, holding a piece of metal in his hand, activating his metal transformation ability. A star-absorbing ring appeared on Adam's finger, then he clenched the ability pill in his hand. He couldn't let people know his true abilities and had to use these two things to deceive Zachary well. The new snake form, altered with a white mask with blue stripes. Adam tried on the mask. This new outfit would be called Snake, with skills different from his second self, Casper Bard, and he could also use fire attacks when necessary. Thanks to Casper becoming part of this, a new organization would emerge from his many forms, called the Judges. Adam's main goal was to judge fallen heroes, and the cost of the organization would be decided by young Master Zachary Well. Late at night, Sinclair arrived at the agreed meeting point with the boy. The boy was fast asleep on the ground when the black-haired man kicked him awake. At first, he didn't realize who was standing over him and started making threats, but a second later, he recognized the masked man and began to apologize. Adam thanked the young master for coming and appreciated the trust he had in him. Zachary clung tightly to the masked man's leg, shouting that Boss Casper Bard could have anything he wanted if he gave him powers. He listed all the benefits he could offer. Sinclair pushed the annoying servant away and replied that he didn't care. Standing menacingly above, Adam hinted that obtaining powers was easy, just look into his eyes. He then used his human control ability, and Zachary's consciousness immediately split in two, sinking into a trance. Adam asked him about the blue pill. There was no response, the boy just sat there, lightly swaying, unresponsive. Sinclair cursed himself, wondering what was happening, why it wasn't working. Then he asked Zachary to slap himself, and when that didn't happen, Adam began to wonder if Zachary had a higher ranking ability than AC, making human control ineffective on him. The dark-haired boy used a mental attack, and Wad fell to the ground with his eyes closed. Sinclair remembered that he hadn't attacked him last time at the bar, but it seemed he had no abilities. Why not give it a shot? Taking advantage of the ability extraction, the dark-haired boy was incredibly surprised. In reality, Zachary did have an ability, a bright green gem left his body and floated into Adam's palm. An A-rank ability was regeneration, usable once after death, rewinding a day. The ability could only be used after death, and it was pretty stupid. As the gem hovered in the air, glowing emerald, Adam still couldn't believe that the young master had an A-rank ability. He directed the power toward himself and decided to treat Zachary well in this case since this ability would allow him to alter the course of events. Now he would invest in the boy with a gem he had received from the monster disposal center. Adam woke Well, who sat up abruptly, shouting to give him the ability and generally asking when he had fallen asleep. The dark-haired boy replied that it happened due to exhaustion, then he took out a metal ring and asked him to look at it. He then explained, to the boy's surprise, that the star-absorbing ring made by the organization could be used to steal others' skill elements. Adam handed him the skill pill and said that the organization used special methods to turn these skill elements into a type of medicine that could grant abilities to ordinary people. Zachary almost dropped the pill bottle. It's really special, they're truly deceiving me. Adam responded that he could drink it and find out. The gears in the boy's head turned twice as fast. Initially, he thought it was poison, but if Casper wanted to kill him, he wouldn't have lasted this long. He didn't care, he would do it. Zachary decided to drink the liquid in the bottle. The bottle fell from my hand and shattered. His eyes turned blood red, and he roared powerfully. The boy knelt before Adam, clutching his head. The masked man laughed loudly, he would soon learn his strength. Wad transformed immediately, screaming that his whole body was burning, turning into a real werewolf. This had nothing to do with the medicine, it was Sinclair controlling the gem remotely. The transformation didn't stop there, instead of human ears, animal ears appeared. Long, sharp claws grew on his feet. Now, a huge, muscular wolf with fiery eyes stood before Adam. The dark-haired boy asked the werewolf what he thought of the transformation ability. The boy looked in amazement at his palm and asked if it was an ability and if he was stronger or weaker than his brother, who could turn into a dragon. Sinclair replied that his brother had an A-rank ability, but Zachary only had an E-rank ability. The boy roared upon hearing about the 3-rank gap. The dark-haired boy coughed lightly and urged the werewolf not to worry, as he had just joined the organization, and later, they could give him F-rank medicine. The werewolf made a funny face, and Adam wondered why the boy turned into a werewolf but became as goofy and adorable as a husky dog. The dark-haired boy also said that since the organization would have to work with a werewolf, they had changed him to an E-rank for Zachary. He pondered, which meant there were other abilities in the organization, implying that one day he could be stronger than his father. He barked, hugged his savior, and begged Adam to change his ability to an A-rank, but Adam refused with a look of disgust. The werewolf continued, shedding a tear, saying he would call the boss his godfather since he had never met anyone as kind. Adam still tried to discourage him, responding that he had no chance because the organization had its own rules and a high rank could only be achieved with enough accomplishments. Zachary obediently sat down on his hind legs and asked about the organization. Sinclair replied, urging him to listen carefully. The organization, the Judges, was founded by a powerful individual. Under the boss were 12 zodiac leaders, and Casper's nickname was the Rooster among the 12 zodiac signs. The werewolf asked how strong the boss was, as his godfather was only a leader. Adam replied that there was no need to guess, the boss was not someone who often showed his face, very mysterious. Zachary immediately asked how quickly he could achieve accomplishments. The dark-haired boy replied that this happened when tasks were completed, and the first task had appeared. Pointing at the werewolf, Bort said that he would use the identity of the young master of the Berkshire Company to gather information about the blue pill. The werewolf asked what it was. They said it seemed to be a pill that could enhance someone's strength, and Casper had gone to Luevio to explore the forces behind it. Zachary's eyes lit up, it could really enhance someone's strength, how amazing. For this, he received a blow to the nape. Adam sternly replied that there was no need to harbor bad intentions, as a hero had used it and accidentally hurt an innocent person. At that moment, the werewolf returned to human form, scratching his head. Zachary asked exactly who had hurt the person. Sinclair said, the A-rank hero of his company, Glacier Adventure. Wade shouted in shock, surprised by what he heard, Bruce Rush, always acting calm, but in reality, just an ordinary addict. Casper said that when the young master found useful information, they would meet again here and then give Zachary a D-rank ability. He nodded. As he left, Sinclair decided to teach the young master a lesson and said he had forgotten to warn about something. The effects of the medicine only lasted a week, the man had limited time, meaning the task had to be completed within a week. Zachary knelt down again, shouting in despair. The next morning, fresh and cheerful, Adam walked on the sidewalk, drinking soda from a cup.